Welcome back. As we've been reporting, the Gazan Health Ministry has said that the Al-Shifa hospital, the largest in Gaza, has suspended operations after running out of fuel. Fierce urban combat between Israeli forces and Hamas in the area surrounding the hospital in northern Gaza is said to have left patients and staff besieged. Israel has denied reports of shooting at the hospital, insisting there is no siege. Well, joining me now is Mark Regev, the former Israeli ambassador to the UK. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, Mr. Regev. Very concerning reports that Al-Shifa Hospital, Gaza's largest, has run out of fuel. Will Israel allow fuel supplies to re-enter Gaza to help hospitals in need?
I'm not sure that report is accurate. That statement was put out by the Hamas-appointed head of the hospital. And they have an interest in presenting a certain picture. We are, as the fighting is ongoing, we've allowed people to leave the hospital, and those people who need to leave in ambulances can do so because we want to facilitate the exit of civilians and of people who are sick. Ultimately, the hospital has been turned into a military site. Underneath Shifa Hospital, there is Hamas's key command and control, and from there is a network of tunnels going literally for kilometre after kilometre after kilometre underground as part of their subterranean terror machine, their military fortifications. So we're taking on that machine, but we don't want to hurt anyone in the hospital.
Mr. Regev, what evidence is there for Hamas operations underneath Al-Shifa? We've spoken to doctors who said they've seen no evidence of Hamas fighters in the vicinity of the hospital.
Well, the truth is, if you ask them off the record, you might get a different answer, because no one in Gaza can stand in front of a Western microphone and say Hamas is using this as a military facility, because they will face retribution. That's the truth. Hamas is not a democratic regime. It's an authoritarian regime, and it rules very brutally when it decides to. But the truth is, the fact that the Hamas military positions under the hospital, if it's a secret, thousands of people in Gaza know it. They know it better than most.
Why haven't Israel shown evidence of Hamas operations underneath the hospital?
We will be as we move ahead. We've been showing, it's actually interesting, as our forces have moved into Gaza City, we've shown, when we've taken a building or taken another street, we've shown pictures of rocket launchers next to babies' beds. We've seen pictures of armaments being used next to schools and so forth. That Hamas uses Gaza's civilians as a human shield for its war machine should come as a surprise to no one. We saw the sort of brutality that they were capable of on October 7th when they invaded my country and massacred our people in the most brutal way. So no one should be surprised that they have any qualms whatsoever. Hamas leaders talk about sacrificing literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Palestinian civilians for their crazy cause. And when they're gone, when we've defeated them and they're no longer ruling Gaza and their military machine has been destroyed, ultimately, the people of Gaza will be better off. Hamas has been running the Gaza Strip for 16 years. What have they got to show for it? What have the people of Gaza received from Hamas? Bloodshed, misery, impoverishment?
No one is defending the actions of Hamas here, but Palestinian civilians are caught in the crossfire. And we are not just hearing news from the Hamas-run Health Ministry in Gaza. We're also hearing from doctors on the ground having to try and look after patients in unthinkable circumstances. Reports now from Al-Shifa that a newborn baby has died and that an adult has died because they've run out of power for their generators. Will you allow fuel in to help hospitals like Al-Shifa who have suspended operations?
So once again, I challenge the veracity of anything coming out of doctors. I put it in inverted commas because Hamas controls the hospital. And the doctors there are very limited in what they can say publicly without facing retribution from an authoritarian regime. Now, we are allowing people to leave. The humanitarian corridor is open. Civilians who want to leave can leave. And people who need medical assistance can leave in an ambulance. We're willing to facilitate that as well. But we cannot have a situation where Hamas has immunity because they've built a military their command post and their military bases underneath a hospital. And that's why we're going in. Our soldiers are risking their lives, going in, fighting house to house, until we get to the head of Hamas. I'd remind you, when the British were part of an international effort to free Iraq from ISIS, There was fighting around a hospital in Mosul, vicious fighting, terrible fighting, and there ISIS used the Mosul hospital like Hamas does today as a military fortification to use the hospital as a human shield. Terrorists have done this sort of thing in the past. We can't let them get away with it. We cannot give them immunity.
With respect, the circumstances in Gaza are different. Gazans can't just flee to safety. Nowhere in Gaza seems safe at the moment. Are you still expecting patients in hospitals in northern Gaza to evacuate?
So our information is that Hamas is preventing people physically. People want to leave and they're not allowed to. Hamas is holding them at gunpoint, so to speak. But we've opened, as I said, a humanitarian corridor allowing people to leave. And if people are wounded, if they are seriously ill and they can't leave on themselves, we're willing to coordinate ambulances. But it's clear Hamas is brutally using the hospital, people in the hospital, as a shield for their machine. That's a war crime. And the Geneva Convention clearly says you cannot use medical facilities for your war machine. And in so doing, you're committing a crime against the rules of war. But Hamas has no qualms whatsoever about doing so.
And where do you expect these patients to go if indeed they do evacuate? We're talking people who are in intensive care, neonatal babies. Where do you expect all of these hundreds of patients and very sick people to go?
Well, they can relocate to the south in ambulances. In the south, the ones who require... No, there have literally been hundreds of people who've crossed the border. The Egyptians have a field hospital on their side of the crossing, the Rafah crossing. There are hospitals, I understand the Jordanians and the Emiratis have established field hospitals inside Gaza in the south. The French have got a ship, a hospital ship, off the coast of the Mediterranean. Of course, we want to make sure that people who need to receive medical treatment can do so. But Hamas has committed an amazing crime against humanity by turning a hospital into a war zone. It's them. It's Hamas by stationing their command and control, by stationing their military machine under a hospital. They've done the crime here. And we are attacking them and trying to be as surgical as we can be and doing all that we can to help civilians vacate the area and to prevent Hamas from having immunity.
With respect, you say patients could go to a field hospital in Egypt. Very few sick and injured people are being allowed across the Rafah crossing into Egypt. You also say that there's been no proof that hospitals have run out of fuel. Is that good enough? Is that a good enough defence when the World Health Organization itself, the United Nations, is saying that a child is dying every 10 minutes in Gaza? Is there not a better way forward here?
Well, I can give you a better way. If someone has if we could send a letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations and saying, please disarm Hamas, and he could do it, we'd be very happy. But unfortunately, there isn't a way. We have to defeat them militarily. There's no substitute for that. And I'd remind you what Hamas itself has said. They've said that we want to do more attacks against Israelis. They've talked about permanent war with Israel. And they have said they would repeat the October 7th massacre when they raped and they burnt people alive and they machine-gunned the young people at the music concert. They machine-gunned them in a ravine. The sort of massacre that they committed on October 7th, not only are they proud of it and they put it all up on social media, showing the world their crimes against humanity, but they've said they'd do it again and again and again. The deputy leader of Hamas said so publicly in an interview a few days ago on Lebanese television. Now, they are a serious enemy. We have a right to destroy that enemy that seeks to butcher our people.
No one is disputing the barbarity and the trauma that your nation witnessed on the 7th of October. But we now have the President of France calling for a ceasefire. Ireland's Leo Varadkar has called for a ceasefire. Are you concerned that you're losing international support here as you lose the moral high ground?
So I think anyone who knows what's going on knows that Israel is scrupulously abiding by the rules of armed conflict, and we're differentiating between civilians and the Hamas terrorists who are our target in this operation. I mean, for over 3 weeks, we've been calling for people to leave the northern Gaza Strip because we knew there would be heavy fighting. And the truth is, hundreds of thousands of civilians, the overwhelming majority of the population, has heeded our advice and have voted with their feet to exit the northern Gaza Strip. A small group of civilians still remain, and we're worried about them, and we're making efforts to help them relocate as well. We want to take on Hamas. We want to destroy Hamas. We don't want to hurt civilians. The trouble is, Hamas is physically at gunpoint preventing civilians from leaving. We're seeing that. We're seeing that every day, unfortunately.
Before I let you go, Mr. Regev, I'd love to ask your thoughts on the summit of Arab leaders in Riyadh today. The Iranian president has said, prior to attending that summit, that the time for words is over. The time has come for action over the conflict in Gaza. Are you concerned that Israel's actions in Gaza will result in an even bigger conflict here?
I hope not. The Iranian president also said he'd like to kiss Hamas, yes, the people who conducted that terrible massacre on October 7th, and with Iranian funding, with Iranian arms, with Iranian support, yes. The rest of the Arab world, I think people who know the Middle East well, and I know at Sky you have people who know the Middle East very well, know there's a dissonance between what is said publicly and what people will say privately. I am convinced that once Israel defeats Hamas, there won't be too many tears shed across Arab capitals. For them, Hamas is a brutal enemy as well.
OK, Mark Regev, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time today.